I have always felt that I was so fortunate in my young years to have wonderful teachers. I grew up in a very tiny little town in southwest Kansas of 200 people. And in spite of that, my parents found the most marvelous first teacher for me when I was 7 years old. And her name was Lila McCune. And she instilled in me, I would say, the real joy and love of making music. She was a very, very upbeat person, always happy, always had a smile on her face. And one of the things that I remember the most about her was that she often at my lessons would sit down next to me and improvise duets. She would just make up something that would go along with my little five-finger pieces that I was learning that would make me sound wonderful. And she taught me through those duet experiences that music always is in motion. Music always moves forward. You never stop anywhere once you start a piece. And it was a very, very good learning experience for me as a young student. And not only did she teach me those elements about always going no matter what, but she just made it fun and joyful. And I know that I could hardly wait to get back each week for my next lesson with her. She also was smart enough to know when to pass me on to another teacher. And after about 4 years of lessons with her, she suggested that I work with someone else. And that, in fact, that person was actually living at the time in my hometown of Copeland. And her name was Jean Culling. Jean was also very inspiring. She was not only a fine pianist, but a very fine church organist. And when I was studying with her, she, I think, really got me into sight reading more and more and playing piano and organ duets in church. I think my love of ensemble playing probably began then too with all of those ensemble experiences. Then once again, I was very fortunate that after a few years with Jean Culling, she moved me on to another teacher that she felt was really much more experienced with more advanced repertoire. And she suggested that I studied with a Catholic nun who was teaching at St. Mary the Plains College in Dodge City, Kansas. And her name was Sister Agnes Therese at the time. That's a very interesting long story. But to this day, I'm still very, very close, good friends with that particular teacher. She left the order when I was in college, and um, she told me that from now on I could refer to her with her Christian name, which was then Mary Lee Coleman. And later she ended up marrying a man by the name of Richard St. John. So then her name became Mary St. John. And they moved to Anna Maria, Florida. And they still live in Florida. They're in a lovely retirement village now in Bradenton, Florida. And we had a wonderful visit with Mary and her husband a couple of years ago in Florida. And then I studied with her from eighth grade through high school. She really instilled in me a really solid technical foundation, and I just adored her. And she passed me then on, when I went to college, to a wonderful professor at the University of Kansas. I was actually scheduled to go to Oberlin. I had a scholarship to Oberlin and was planning to go there. But I went to the University of Kansas for summer school, right before that fall semester that I was to be at Oberlin, and fell in love with the campus. I just really enjoyed my teacher, whose name was Richard Reber. And Richard was a student of Rosina Levine at the Eastman School. And so he had just a wonderful, wonderful background of piano pedagogy and technique. And the thing I learned, I think, the most from him was to really get into the nitty gritties of theory, understanding musical structure, as well as very, very intense musical ideas that were so helpful to me and inspiring at the same time. So I really had wonderful teachers growing up, and all of them, I feel, made me the teacher that I am today. Because I love teaching more than anything. Yes, I've written lots of music for students of all levels, but um, I think at heart, I'm really primarily a teacher first and foremost.
Since we're on topic of a teacher at heart, I would love for you to share a bit of your teaching philosophy.
Yeah, every student is different, as you know. They all respond differently to different things. But I think my primary goal as a teacher is to create a student who is totally independent at some point from me. I want them to learn how to practice efficiently. I want them to be good sight readers so that someday when they no longer have a teacher, they can always have music for a lifetime. That they can sit down and learn almost anything and understand how to practice it, how to make it musical, how to um, how to play from their soul, so to speak. So to me, those are perhaps the most important things that I can teach a young student to do. But um, it's interesting today. I'm teaching only adults. I over the many years that I've been teaching, I've taught every conceivable age group, I think. When I was teaching for 24 years at the University of Montana, of course, back then I had primarily piano performance majors, and I also taught piano pedagogy there. And so we worked with 8-year-olds a lot in the pedagogy classes, both in private and group situations. And Um, of course, I adored my piano performance majors, and in those days we were working on big repertoire. We were working on major concertos and preparing them for competitions and festivals and all of that. Yet, well, today I find myself teaching only adult students, and most of them, in fact, are elementary. Some of them are first-ranked beginners, and I just love it. I Many of these students have become very good friends, and I do have 2 or 3 more advanced students, and I love working with them as well too. But I just I just feel that no matter what level of student that I'm working with, it's always a challenge, and it's also inspiring because I find myself, I think, being a better teacher when I have students who ask lots of questions or who have lots of problems that need to be solved. So it often forces me to think very differently as a teacher, to come up with different ways of helping them to achieve the goals that they have in their piano work. You've asked me about creativity and musicianship. Um, I've always felt that students need to have a good background in developing descriptive vocabulary. I want them to always have at the tip of their tongue good words to describe um, the character of a piece. What do they feel when they play this piece? What are they thinking? What kind of a picture are they going to try and paint at the keyboard? And so I ask students a lot in my teaching uh, those types of questions that will make them think about how they feel, what they picture, what's a good expressive word that describes the character of a particular piece. So to me, these are things that really help to build their confidence and their own musicality when they're performing any type of piece, whether it be Baroque music or contemporary music, everything in between.
How did you decide to become composer? And also, as a composer, how does that help you with your piano teaching? Do you see a clear connection between the two?
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting that I never aspired to be a composer. It was the furthest thing from my mind. I in college was a piano performance major. I simply wanted to teach. I wanted to perform. I loved chamber music. I have always done a lot of chamber music. When I was teaching at the University of Montana, I did a lot of performing with a wonderful violinist, and we did most of that repertoire for violin and piano. And I was just perfectly content and very, very happy being a teacher and a performer. And how I got into composing was really quite a fluke. I had a very good friend in Texas by the name of Amanda Vick Lethko. As you know, was one of, I think, our country's most esteemed pedagogues. And in her day, she was so revered. And she and along with Willard Palmer were Morty Manis as well were the authors of Alfred's Basic Piano Library, which back in 1981, when it was just getting off the ground, became very popular. And Amanda was visiting Montana one summer, and we went to dinner together. And over dinner, she, if you ever knew Amanda or ever heard her speak, she was this wonderful Southern lady, and she had quite a Southern accent, and she called everybody honey. Her students were her puppies, and everybody was honey. And she looked across the table at me. She said, "Honey," she said, "would you be willing to help Willard and I um, promote our piano method?" She thought that teachers might enjoy having a male figure talking to them about piano pedagogy and about teaching. And she said, "You'd be the perfect person for this." And I was flattered, of course, that she would ask me, but I was very intimidated at the thought of it because I knew that everybody in the universe knew her and everybody knew Willard Palmer. They had such big names, and no one had ever probably heard of Dennis Alexander at the University of Montana at the time. So I initially said no, but thank you very much. Um, Thank you for having such confidence in me. Well, she persisted and talked me into flying out to Burbank, California in early 1986 to meet with Morty Manis, who was the president and the CEO of Alfred Music. And Morty was wonderful, and we spoke for a while, and he talked me into giving some workshops that that winter. which is the worst time of the year to be giving workshops. But he just wanted to test me and to see how, not only how I would like it, but how the reaction might be from teachers. And it ended up being a very positive experience. So then he booked me for a full round of, I think, 25 or 28 clinics that next summer. And at one of the first workshops, he and his wife Iris came to observe me, and over lunch, he said that they needed to have duet books to correlate with the method, and Willard Palmer did not have time to write them. And would I please consider doing that? And in all honesty, I looked at him and said, Morty, I said, I've never written anything in my life. And he was very surprised. And he said, well, why not? I said, well, frankly, no one's ever asked me to, and I'm just very happy being a teacher. But you know what? I said, I think I could do that. I've taught piano pedagogy long enough that I know what teachers like and what they might not like, and I'd be happy to give it a try. So that's where my career really began as a composer. I wrote all of the duet books that correlated with Alfred's basic piano library, and Willard Palmer was very happy with what I sent in. He had to give final approval, of course. And from there, Marty started asking me to write solo collections, and my career as a composer just kind of took off very unexpectedly. And before I knew it, I kind of felt like I had two full-time jobs, one working for Alfred Publishing and another at the university. It was a very, very happy relationship, and I discovered something about myself that I never knew I could do. I, of course, studied theory and counterpoint and all of this in college, but I never studied composition ever seriously. But uh, I was very fortunate that my early level teachers never discouraged me from improvising, because as a child and growing up, I improvised all the time. Now, when I look back at those days, I know that having that ability to improvise was very, very helpful in my work as a composer, because I certainly improvise a lot when I'm coming up with new pieces. Most teachers, if they don't know much about me, they have no idea. They just assume that I was a composition major, perhaps, along with piano. But no, I was a piano performance all the way, and just happened to fall into this opportunity. But I always tell college students, whenever I have an opportunity to visit with them in pedagogy classes or at conferences, I always tell them to uh, work hard when you're in college to be well-rounded. Take every type of thing you can take, because you never know what might lie around the corner, what opportunities might arise. And if you're prepared to do lots of different things, then you're going to have so many more opportunities in this wonderful profession of music.
Why should we play American music, especially the living composers' music?
Well, I think for one thing, it's always really fun for young students to have a personal connection with a living composer. When I was growing up, I never had that opportunity. Um, I, I, I think I would have flipped as a child if I'd had an opportunity to actually play a living composer's piece with him listening to me. So I think that for young students today, having that opportunity to connect personally, whether it might be over the internet or it might be in a festival situation, I think it's inspiring for young people to to hear a living composer give them feedback on their performance. Um, I'm going to Tulsa, Oklahoma at the end of September to do a Dennis Alexander festival that they've organized there. So I've done these sorts of things many times over the years, and it's always great fun for me to hear my music being played by young people, and it's particularly gratifying when it's played well. Um, Sometimes, we never know what's going to happen with performances of our music, but most of the time, I'm very um, pleased and impressed by the performances that I hear of my pieces. Nothing's more gratifying than to write music for young people and to feel that somehow it is inspiring them to practice better or inspiring them to perform in public. And it's one of the, I think, most gratifying aspects of being a composer of educational music is having that personal connection. So I think is we live in a time when there are so many wonderful composers out there today. Um, I have uh, built such wonderful friendships over the years with so many of our leading educational composers, and they all seems to write such wonderful pieces for young people. And there's a wealth of material out there for them to choose from. So I hope that these young people will continue to play lots of music by American pedagogical composers, because I think not only is it fun and inspiring for them, but it will also help them to play the music by those master composers even better if they have a good background in pedagogical repertoire that builds their technique properly and builds their musicianship, so that when they sit down and play a Chopin nocturne, they'll have a better grasp of what that music is all about. Over the years as a teacher, I always try my best to to choose repertoire that's going to make that student sound the best.
Mm.
And and for me, when I give workshops to piano teachers, I always tell them that one of the most important things you can do as a teacher is to choose the right kind of repertoire for your students, because there's so much to choose from. And so often I see situations where teachers might give students music that's too hard for them
Mm.
at a certain age, and it creates so many problems when this happens. And it's another reason why I think it's so important for teachers to uh, be be really aware of the wealth of material that's available by pedagogical composers today in America, because as I said, there's so much to choose from, and so much of it is superb teaching material that really works so well for young students and prepares them for the classical masterpieces that so many of them want to play and will play for their lifetime.